After an incredible 50 years, the legendary Chuck Scarborough is stepping down from the anchor desk here at NBC New York. Back in March, we celebrated Chuck's 50th anniversary here at WNBC and his remarkable run. Tonight, we honor that legacy once more, reflecting on his impact here at 30 Rock and across the tri-state, with Chuck's final thoughts a little later.
Good evening, I'm Chuck Scarborough.
The hospitals we've checked with so far all are working on auxiliary power.
Let's see what it feels like to break the sound barrier. John Lennon, the former Beatle, has been shot.
A catastrophic explosion destroyed the Space Shuttle Challenger.
On the crash of that TWA flight 800.
We're climbing to 8,000 feet now over the south shore of Long Island.
September 11, 2001 became a day that will live in infamy.
Certainly one of the more tragic scenes was what happened this morning at the Sandy Hook Volunteer Fire Department up the hill here, not far from the school.
Tonight, we are celebrating Chuck Scarborough's 50 years at WNBC. 30 Rockefeller Plaza is the heart and soul of NBC News, and Chuck is certainly a cornerstone of this iconic building. We're going to take a look back at his legendary career. We're going to visit the Tonight Show studio, where Chuck spent the bulk of his time here anchoring before Jimmy Fallon moved in. And oh yes, we're going to be talking about his longtime anchoring partner and friend, Sue Simmons. So without further ado, let's bring in the man himself, Chuck Scarborough.
David.
Chuck, going to be awfully hard to condense your career into 30 minutes.
Can't be done, David. Sorry.
That's true.
Really, when I look at these doors here and think about walking through them a half a century ago, it's just hard to believe. I couldn't imagine then what adventure would lie ahead covering this thriving metropolis. This is the most exciting place in the world. I've been privileged to be here for 50 years, half a century.
Why don't we head in and try to tell this amazing story?
Right.
There is no power at all at Bellevue Hospital.
From New York City's infamous dark night to its darkest hour.
So we've just gotten word. The story gets steadily worse. Now, 7 World Trade Center has collapsed.
To its long stretch of dark days.
At any moment, we could learn if there was a third known case of novel coronavirus in New York.
Chuck Scarborough has been a light to lead the way, an iconic beacon on the city landscape that has been as tall, steady, and recognizable as the Empire State Building. 50 years ago, Chuck came to New York City with a swagger and a mission, tapped to boost the ratings of the NBC flagship station.
Mike, this is Chuck. You and I are going to have a little conversation. You've got the top of the 6 tonight.
Yes, he had the velvet voice and dashing good looks, but he also had what people in the biz call gravitas, the chops to get out of the studio and do some good storytelling. Chuck has done that a lot.
I was able to, for whatever reason, build up a reservoir of trust with the audience over time.
President Johnson told a news conference today.
Chuck started building that reservoir of trust with the audience in Biloxi, Mississippi, after a stint in the Air Force as an electronics engineer working on intercontinental ballistic missiles.
Well, that's a bit of a pivot.
So there was a local television station in Biloxi, Mississippi, where the Air Force Base was, where I've been stationed, and I walked in the door and I said, look, I know something about electronics, I know something about TV, perhaps I could be of help. And I got hired.
It wasn't long before bigger markets came calling. Atlanta, Boston, then the biggest of them all, New York City.
Winning this race is as good as winning the new New York State Lottery.
At a time in the Big Apple when crime was spiraling and disco balls were spinning, Chuck leaned in with a commanding gaze and a reporter's eye. In an exclusive and gritty New York, Chuck talked his way into the hospital room of an aspiring model, Marla Hansen, whose face had been slashed.
I walked in like I belonged at St. Vincent's Hospital, and I went up an elevator, got off at a random floor, and asked the nurse's station where Marla Hansen was, and they happily told me, and then I walked into the room.
I mean, I was so scared. I knew the minute I saw them behind me that I felt like I was dead.
I think I got back, probably 10 of 11, back to the station, and just gave the tape to playback and said, just cue it to the first frame, and I'm going to ad-lib the intro, and we'll just let it run.
I screamed, and I held my face and tried to get help, and I went back to the bar where I had originally been, and the police came in, and we identified the gentleman, and they brought me to the hospital.
And that was a global exclusive.
My father flew a B-17 in the Second World War.
Chuck took a call from a viewer once that led to one of the most compelling stories he's ever reported. And it was a bombshell of sorts.
I chills The hair on my hand just stood up.
After a little snippet on the air about a B-17, and I got a phone call because I had mentioned that my father had flown one.
Joe Couric had just realized that what he had often wondered was true. I was the son of the man he had bailed out of a crippled bomber with over Nazi-occupied territory in January of 1945.
He was the ball turret gunner, and he had photographs. So I had this documentation of it, of my childhood favorite story. So I arranged a reunion.
Chuck.
Joe, for God's sakes.
Gee whiz, how are you? How are you? God.
And here was somebody who had been on the same plane with him, had bailed out with him, had been through that adventure.
And I think he went out, I think he fell out the door backwards, didn't you, Joe, as I recall the story. Yeah, he acted like he wasn't scared at all. He just said, now here's the way to do it, guys, and he just went out the door backwards, you know, which no fool would do in his right mind.
Yeah.
What went through your mind, Dad, when Joe got off the elevator and you saw him again after all that time?
This is Joe. I was saying, you know, thinking to myself, this is really Joe Couric after all these years.
And that turned into a really sweet piece, really nice piece. Yeah.
Proceed straight in for runway 60, altimeter 3011.
Clearly, Chuck's passion for aviation is in his DNA, and his knowledge as a pilot and Air Force veteran has informed his coverage of many headline-making events through the years, including the most haunting one.
You know, I knew why the buildings fell down immediately. But I had a job to do then. You know, I had to look at this objectively. I had to look at this analytically. I had to look at this sympathetically. I had to begin to try to piece it together. What happened? Who did this?
Like so many of us, Chuck mourned and remembered 9/11 in ways public and private. On anniversaries, he reminds us of the story of Wells Crowther, the man in the red bandana who rushed people to safety before the South Tower collapsed on him.
You strongly suspected that the mysterious man in the red bandana was Wells.
I knew it was Wells. He acted in such a courageous and wonderful way.
It was a powerful story of a family that was both devastated and prideful. On the 10th anniversary of 9/11, one of the stories that I did for that was on the Pride of Midtown Firehouse, where every firefighter on duty on 9/11 was killed.
As you're looking at each name, because you know every guy and you know every face and you know their families, and you could just imagine how much it hurts.
It was a very powerful reminder of the price that we paid. The duty board was still there, and I have made it a point to go back on every anniversary, just go back, drop into the firehouse, see how they're doing. Because it just seems important to me.
In the years since, Chuck has found the right words when it seems like there are none to describe the horror in front of us. At Sandy Hook in Newtown, he was on the ground just hours after sheer madness.
Tonight, the people in this town are simply trying to make an adjustment, trying to figure out how in the world they're going to cope with this and get a handle on this terrible tragedy.
And in the barren months of COVID, Chuck offered words of comfort and resolve for the weary.
Instead of revealing itself in a single explosive morning, it is 9/11 in slow motion.
In both cases, the city was shut down, shockingly shut down, and life changed on a dime. So I thought I should tell the viewers, really, that this will get through this.
After the shock and loss, we recovered. This pandemic will pass, and as certain as the sunrise, we will do it all again.
But lest you think it's been all doom and gloom with Chuck, he's had plenty of moments of fun on this ride, and off camera, he is known for a robust sense of humor.
When the snow begins to accumulate, it's time to go check the avalanche conditions. Let's go.
I didn't tighten my visor. I heard something back there.
One of his favorites, take your daughter to work day.
And here with the story is my daughter, Elizabeth Scarborough. Elizabeth?
That was a wonderful tradition that began to bring young women into the workplace.
Dad, there's some controversy about Take Your Daughters to Work Day. What am I supposed to do about it?
You're a reporter. Report it.
Okay.
So I thought, I'm just going to make Elizabeth a reporter. And I'm going to help her, but she's going to do the story. I was on the set, because then I decided, really got bold, because we put the package together. And then I thought, I'm going to put her on live. I got down there, I thought, oh my God, what have I done? She's never been on television in her life, and she just ran with it. She ran with it. Yeah.
Some say there is nothing wrong with setting aside a day just for young women. By the way, Dad, I can't wait till my brother sees this.
I'll bet. Well done, young lady.
Thanks, Dad.
Beginning in 1974 with Jim Hartz, Chuck has had many solid co-anchors through the years.
Good evening, I'm Jack Cafferty.
I'm Chuck Scarborough.
Good evening, I'm Chuck Scarborough.
And I'm Natalie Pascarella.
But there is only one Sue Simmons. She joined Chuck in 1980 at 11 p.m. and stuck around for 32 years.
Sue just arrived with just a bang. I mean, she was such a big personality and so playful and irreverent and kept everybody on their toes. You never knew what Sue was going to say.
Right.
Because as I've said many times, she's never had an unspoken thought.
So when somebody asks you what was it like working with Sue, what do you say?
It was a once-in-a-lifetime thrill.
A once-in-a-lifetime thrill.
Al Roker was a part of that anchor team for a long time and has known Chuck Scarborough for decades.
What Chuck's superpower is, and has always been, is that he's a great team player. The team of Chuck and Sue is still one of the greatest anchor teams in local television news.
It's been a wonderful privilege. It really has been. To have worked at the National Broadcasting Company for half a century, I am grateful. It's probably the best word. Grateful that I was able to do that.
Chuck, you have seen and witnessed so much over 50 years, and you broadcast largely from an historic building when it comes to broadcasting, Rockefeller Center, 30 Rock.
Many, many years, yes. Studio 6B, this storage studio here, probably the most historic studio in the history of television. Right here. All these shows came from Studio 6B.
And the bulk of your broadcast came from this studio, so we're going to go in. Also, I know you caught up with your co-anchor for so many of those years, Sue Simmons.
Yes, indeed.
So we're going to listen to that as well.
Yeah, great job.
I'm here at Sue Simmons' apartment. We're going to sit down and talk like we don't even know cameras are here.
Happy 50th, Chuck Scarborough. Congratulations.
I mean, I've been watching you all my life, basically, and wow, what a huge landmark for you, and great success to you.
Chuck, it's been an absolute honor to be your partner at 6. A privilege to be among the many talented co-anchors who are at your side over 5 decades. You are a true example of class and professionalism, a truth seeker who worked hard every day to bring our viewers what matters most. You encouraged so many journalists to strive for excellence. Journalists just like me, grateful to have an opportunity to work in a newsroom that was led by the Chuck Scarborough. David.
Bob Hope, Jack Parr, Johnny Carson, now Jimmy Fallon. Some of the legendary names that have appeared in this very studio, which we call Studio 6B at 30 Rock. But there's another name that's a legend for us, Chuck Scarborough. Chuck, we are in the studio that you spent really the bulk of your 50 years anchoring in.
It's astounding.
I know.
This is such a storied studio.
Well, let's share it with everybody.
Sure.
We're going to peel the curtain back and take a look.
Now, when I came here in 1974, you can imagine.
Yeah.
This Studio 6B at 30 Rock is the most storied studio in the history of television with all of the shows that were here before. And we took the studio over from The Tonight Show.
Yeah. Johnny Carson goes to L.A.
Yeah.
And then local news, WNBC takes it over.
And we blow the whole thing open.
Yeah.
All the audience seats are gone.
Right.
Build this enormous set that was designed by the guy who designed the sets for Star Trek.
So it looks like the Enterprise.
It does,
doesn't
yeah. It looks like the Starship Enterprise.
Over here would have been what back then? This is down.
Over there, that was where the conversation area was. So it's kind of the same thing right now. They had chairs set up over this little corner here.
Right.
And we had ceilings in here. That was a mistake, by the way.
Yeah.
It didn't work, but the Star Trek designer put ceilings in on the television
Down
set.
low.
But then you came over here. Now we're in where the pit was.
This is
this big conversation pit right here that was sunken, so several steps to go down. Lots of monitors all over the place, big, what they call Vismo screens, which were the rear projection screens. And then the anchor desk was an enormous thing sitting over in that area right over there. Nobody had anything approaching this. It was such a sensation that one night I looked over and I saw Walter Cronkite sneaking around behind the set. He'd come over to take a look at it in person.
Wow.
CBS.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did he say
I went over, I
hello,
caught
at
him. I said, Walter, what are you doing here? And he said, oh my God, you caught me. At least I could have been rifling the files.
Yeah.
But
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's how much curiosity that that it created in the market at that
Yeah.
time. Okay.
No, it was pretty amazing. Well, it was several years we had this set, and it proved to be a little bit awkward. As dramatic as it looked, it was hard to work on and hard to work with. So eventually we began redesigning things and changing the dimensions, and we never did put the audience seats back in.
No.
didn't happen until Jimmy Fallon stole my studio.
He stole?
Yeah, you know.
Yeah.
he wanted to bring the Tonight Show back to New York when he
did.
Was
Yeah,
host,
and gone so long. But it was always, even my time here, the immense
Yeah.
size of Studio 6B was just striking for anyone who came to work here.
I've got a little story to tell you about Jimmy Fallon.
Oh, yeah?
When he first got the Tonight Show and it was announced he was going to be the new host on the Tonight Show, I interviewed him here. And we, upstairs, in our newsroom studio that we then were broadcasting out of because we've been given the boot from 6B.
I know what you're doing here, Jimmy.
You know what's going on.
Yeah, I know, yeah. You know, first you kicked me out of 6B 5 years ago, my studio.
Get over it.
And then you take over Studio 6A.
Get over it.
You're casing the joint, aren't you? You want my studio again.
And I said to him as an opening question, I said, you know, Jimmy, you were born in New York City the year I arrived in New York City. And here we are 40 years later. Who could have guessed that little Jimmy Fallon would grow up to take my studio?
Take your studio.
And he said, he looked at me without missing a beat and said, Dad?
That's a great story. That's a great story.
This is News 4 New York with Chuck Scarborough and Sue Simmons.
You spent most of those years in here with a co-anchor at 11 named Sue Simmons. I don't know if you're familiar with her. I know you are. And I know you recently spent some time with her. You guys reconnected.
I did. We stayed in touch.
Yes.
You know, she and I were together for 32 and a half years.
Exactly.
And we've stayed in touch over the years since she left. So, yes, she finally agreed to invite me over to the apartment to do an interview with her, to talk to her, and we got back together to have a little chat about what it was like in the old days.
And we'd like to hear some of that chat.
Now, look at me.
Hi, hon.
This is the point, right? Come on.
Oh. I just thought you were keeping me company.
Well, you did the show, yeah.
Tonight I gain a partner on the late edition of News Center 4, Sue Simmons.
I went to your house.
Yes.
And met you there, I believe. And I was very uncomfortable. Going into the man's house, I don't even know him.
Yeah.
But, you know, it smoothed out quickly, I thought.
Yeah.
If you're going to be your silly self, do it on a one-shot. You must respect Chuck Scarborough.
Do you remember your first broadcast? With me, I mean, not your first one altogether.
I don't remember a lot of it because I was petrified. New York City, my home. You know, a lot of people were intimidated about coming to New York. Oh, it's New York.
Yeah.
I was just concerned about people that I knew and what they thought of me.
Really?
Yeah, not, you know.
Yeah.
Anyhow.
It wasn't obvious.
What, that I was petrified?
No, not at all. I don't remember you being petrified. Yeah. I was petrified, but I remember being petrified.
Something about me that petrified.
Yeah.
You did very well tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good to have you.
I'm so nervous I couldn't eat.
Do you remember collapsing my chair seconds before airtime repeatedly?
Yes, and I would do it again today.
I know. If this thing had a handle
Yeah,
on it,
boom, down you would go.
Yeah, the handle on the chair, the anchor chair that lowered it and raised it was on the right-hand side. I sat to the left of you, so it was very easy for you when I wasn't looking to reach over and hit that handle, and my chair would drop 6 inches. And there were a number of broadcasts I did actually in sort of a standing squat because of that.
Everywhere I go, I have a partay.
Oh, you do?
Yes.
It sort of organically happened, I think.
Yeah.
We met. It was a forced marriage in
Yes.
1980, and we began working together. And I don't think it took us too long to figure out what our respective roles were. You know, it was 32 nerve-wracking years for me.
I said, 32 nerve-wracking years.
Yes, but in a delightful way. Yeah.
In a good way.
Shut the front door. Almost got you, didn't it?
There was something special about that relationship on and off air that endures. And you've become a dear friend. I adore you.
And I you.
Thank you for this invitation. This has been a treat.
You're special in my life.
Yeah. And I think, you know what? I think we've been sitting together now for 35 minutes, which is exactly the time of our 11 o'clock broadcast. 35 minutes, 11 to 11:35.
Good night, everybody.
Yes. Would you like to dance?
That's our news for tonight.
right?
Thank you very much for joining us. Have a nice night.
Chuck, that was quite the suave move with the taxi dance and Sue.
Yeah. That's how I introduced Sue to the audience.
Yeah.
In a little different way.
Yeah, it worked. Listen, since we were here at Studio 6B, just outside the studio is a little hidden gem that we're kind of proud of and protective of.
Yes, this was hidden completely behind a sealed closet until they came along to renovate the Tonight Show for Jimmy Fallon to take over, bringing it back to New York. And they discovered Jim Henson, when he was waiting to go on, used to decorate these pipes inside, the steam pipes and whatever, inside the closet. So it was such an extraordinary discovery that we decided to preserve it.
Yeah.
There it is, behind glass.
Yeah, for a while I was there from the mid-'60s, and now it's kind of something that we like to share. All right, when we come back, we're going to have some words from the man himself, reflecting on quite the journey.
New Yorkers are fortunate to have had you in their living rooms all these years. Chuck, congratulations for 50 years in television.
What were you, 7 when you started? People have looked forward to seeing your face and hearing your voice every night.
It might be easy to take you for granted, Chuck Scarborough, day in, day out, decade in, decade out, but 50 years is an incredible accomplishment. Congratulations.
In honor of your big milestone, I thought I'd write you a thank you note. Thank you, Chuck Scarborough, for celebrating 50 years as a broadcast journalist anchoring the news for NBC4 New York. Of course, over that time, we've seen you go through many phases. There was your 70s phase, your 80s phase, your 90s grunge phase, your emo phase, your Ken phase, and now your New York legend phase. Happy golden anniversary, Chuck Scarborough. Congratulations, bud.
I'm going to leave you with a final thought I shared with my NBC colleagues earlier this year when they gathered in the Rainbow Room atop this building to celebrate my 50th anniversary with the National Broadcasting Company. Itself a quintessential American success story, founded by a Russian immigrant named David Sarnoff, who began by selling newspapers at the age of 15 to help support his struggling family. I urge my colleagues to do something I still do, to reestablish perspective, appreciation, a sense of mission. That message was aimed at our work here, the grinding challenges of daily news gathering. But it just as easily applies to our city and to our country and to all of you, all of us. We all need to lift our eyes occasionally from the political fevers and societal imperfections of the day and appreciate what we have, how far we've come, and the opportunity we've been given to continue our journey toward a more perfect union. Thank you, and good night. Walk out on Fifth Avenue and look back through the Channel Gardens, across the skating rink, above the statue, at this towering building with awe, and say, I work here. I work here, and this is important. What I do is important. I work for the National Broadcasting Company, the oldest and largest television network in this country, with a storied history. Feel the weight of that history and the weight of the responsibility that we all bear to get it right, to do it well, to make it interesting. Thank you for everything you've said today. I'm touched beyond belief, and it's an honor to work with you.